What will be the consequences of the meeting with President Lopez Obrador of Mexico and President Biden and Prime Minister Justin Trudeau of Canada? Join Richard Ebeling and me in this week's Libertarian Angle as we examine that question. Hi, I'm Jacob Hornberger, president of the Future of Freedom Foundation, and this is this week's Libertarian Angle, the show that you all know brings you the principled, uncompromising case for the libertarian philosophy within the context of the burning issues of the day. I'm joined by my co-host, Richard Ebeling, professor of economics at the Citadel. Richard, good to see you again.
Good to see you and to be with our viewers and listeners in the new year.
Yeah, we missed you the last couple of weeks. You've started a new semester at the Citadel. You want to tell us about what you're teaching this semester?
I'm teaching principles of microeconomics and intermediate macroeconomics, and have a variety of seemingly pretty good students.
That's good. Well, you were telling me about one particular student that kind of surprised you with an experience that you had this morning. Why don't you tell us about that? It's kind of a positive.
A very nice young man. He's in the intermediate macroeconomics, and he was commenting that he had been in London this past semester on an internship arranged through the school, obviously. And I said, well, what were you doing? And he said, well, it was arranged by the Margaret Thatcher Foundation, and I was an intern at the Institute of Economic Affairs. And if probably many of our viewers don't know this, but the Institute of Economic Affairs, IEA, was founded in around 1956 by a fellow named Anthony Fisher, who had made a fortune in the poultry business. And he wanted to try to change the political currents in Britain. So he went for advice to Friedrich Hayek. And he said, well, Professor Hayek, should I try to run for politics? And Hayek said, no. You have to try to influence the current of ideas. Current politics reflects the currents of political views 10, 20, 30 years ago. So if you want to influence politics, you have to change the climate of opinion. So if you're going to spend your money, invest it in an educational organization. So he funded the Institute of Economic Affairs, which is one of the preeminent free market, classical liberal, policy-oriented institutions in the United Kingdom, and is highly recommended. In fact, many of Margaret Thatcher's views came through the publications of IEA.
All right, and he had attended this seminar or an internship.
He was an intern there. He was an internship position working on some projects for them.
That's fascinating.
And I said, well, did you have a chance to read anything? And they said, yeah, they gave me a copy of The Road to Serfdom by Hayek. And I said, did you read it? He says, yeah, it was great.
So he spends an internship as part of a semester abroad then, huh?
Correct. Part of a semester abroad.
Yeah, that's an interesting program. All right, Richard, let's get on to business. Right now, there's a meeting, or there was a meeting, it may be over by now, between the president of Mexico. They call him AMLO. That's the way I know him. I forget what his name is. In any event, they call him AMLO. And then President Biden and the prime minister or president, whatever they call him in Canada, Trudeau. And they're down there discussing things like, free trade, or what they consider, I guess, just trade, because they don't really believe in free trade. Of course, the big subject of discussion was immigration. I would imagine they discussed the drug war, because just before Biden arrived there, they busted the son of El Chapo. El Chapo's a famous drug dealer or drug cartel leader in, I think, the state of Sinaloa, who was captured and brought over to the United States and now is serving a life sentence in a federal penitentiary. So amidst all this hullabaloo, they attacked his son, one of his three sons. They were succeeded in doing that right before Biden comes in. They lost 10 soldiers, got killed in this battle. And of course, nothing ever changes. I mean, I don't know why they think that's going to have a big effect. The guy has two brothers in this cartel, and as an intelligent as guys as President of Mexico is, AMLO, it's just, it boggles my mind that he still cannot understand that the only solution to ending all these cartels is drug legalization. I mean, Mexico used to be a nice country to visit. I mean, American tourists would go down there and drive around the country and weren't worried about anything. Maybe running out of gas was their biggest problem, but nobody dares do that now, especially in the northern states, Sinaloa and so forth, because of the drug dealers that are as a direct result of the drug war. And why this man can't see that is absolutely amazing. But I think part of it is that the drug war bureaucracy is so powerful, both in this country and down in Mexico, because they're making money off bribes and payoffs and generous salaries. I mean, you got judges both at the federal and state level and prosecutors that thrive off this drug war. It's been going on since, gosh, the 1960s, maybe 50s, even before, really. But the more cartel leaders they bust, they put them in jail, and they're just quickly replaced by somebody else. There's a great series I recommend for people to watch called Narcos and Narcos Mexico on Netflix. It really explains the depth of the problem, that they knock out one cartel and it's replaced by another one or by people in that cartel. And then there's, of course, the perpetual immigration problem. I mean, it's really funny, Richard, to watch these guys just, hand-wring over what are we going to do about immigration? What are we going to do about immigration? And I've seen this for all my life. This perpetual immigration crisis, this chaos on the border, and all this anxiety and depression and tension that causes people. Once you realize that this socialist immigration system, and that's what it is. It's socialist because it's based on the socialist principle of central planning. Once you realize that it's the system itself that is the cause of all this crisis and chaos, and that the only solution is liberty, economic liberty, free trade and open immigration, that is genuine open borders, the free movements of goods and services and people across borders, which is our heritage as Americans. We live with open immigration for more than 100 years. As soon as you come to that realization, you get a sense of inner peace. You don't do all this hand-wringing and, oh my gosh, what are we going to do about the crisis on the border and the invasion and all this nonsense? But it's clear that Biden and AMLO and Trudeau are not ready for that kind of system, because they're over there trying to make their system work. They will never make it work, Richard, no matter what they do. The press calls it comprehensive immigration reform. I mean, what a ludicrous term. You cannot reform something that's inherently defective. They say the system's broken. The system's not broken. It's inherently defective. Socialism is an inherently defective paradigm. No matter what you do, no matter what reform is adopted, no matter how long these presidents get together to try to solve this problem, it will never end. The deaths along the border, that comes with socialism too. The police state along the border, that comes with socialism. And of course, the crisis and the chaos. And the related concept is trade. They hand-wring over, how are we going to do trade, and how, to what extent are American businessmen going to be able to do business in Mexico, and the same with respect to Mexican businesses in the United States. And of course, that's how they got this huge free trade agreement like NAFTA, which consisted of thousands of pages of rules and regulations. Again, the only system is unilateral free trade, or preferably bilateral free trade, just the free movements of goods, services, and again, people across borders. They're not there yet, but that is really the only solution to all this mayhem along the border. What do you think?
Well, let me sort of amplify for a few things. Why is it so difficult for these people to understand the type of perspective that you're offering? And I think there's several of them. We had another period of radical prohibition, and it was anti-alcohol in the 1920s. It was against the federal law for the manufacture, distribution, and sale of alcoholic beverages from 1920 to 1933. And as that decade progressed, many people saw that it was a failure. Corruption, hypocrisy, vast black markets, wide variety of negative spillover effects, gang warfare, violence on the streets, spillovers on innocent bystanders, a breakdown of the proper sense of respect for law, because many people came to see, is this really a desirable law? Why should I obey a law that I don't think is legitimate or necessary in my case? But why did it persist for 13 years? There appeared a book a number of years ago called Bootleggers and Baptists. And the theme of this book was to say, well, who supported prohibition as the decade went on? And there were the zealots who believed, oh, it's immoral. It's a terrible social vice if people drink. The little kiddies have to be protected. And therefore, we ought to have a law to keep it away from the little kiddies and the weak-minded and those who attempted to squander their wealth on drink. And who were they combined with? The black marketeers, the bootleggers. For as long as it was illegal, they could control these monopoly markets. And sometimes you'd have gang warfare to decide, well, who would win the violence to be the monopolist until another shootout broke out. But it was basically those, and we see the same thing today. These cartels in northern Mexico that particularly have the sway in northern Mexico that seems to pervade all of Mexico to one degree or another. Do they have a motive or an incentive to see the anti-drug laws repealed? No, of course not. Immediately, just as happened after 1933, when prohibition officially ended with an amendment to the US Constitution to repeal the original Prohibition Amendment, all the crime disappeared. You could now buy alcohol, any form of liquor, in liquor stores, at the local, you have a drink at the local bar or saloon, and all the crime and corruption of daily life and the political system and the law enforcement agencies disappeared. Because now it's above board, it's legal, it's open and free and peaceful competition. So what would happen if all of these anti-drug laws were to be repealed? Well, the cartels would be out of business. So it is in their interest, even though while fighting the police who either put on fronts or sometimes seriously try to repress them, the fact is they don't want these laws repealed. It gives them this control of these markets, even when they fight sometimes among themselves, that are worth billions of dollars. So they have a motive to keep the anti-drug laws on the markets, since it protects their monopoly positions. And then there are the do-gooders. And I'm using the term do-gooder in the most pejorative sense now. Those who think that they know how other people should live. Oh, these people shouldn't take this drug. Oh, these people shouldn't get high with this. Oh, they could be tempting a little kid. But yeah, it doesn't go away. You've made it illegal and you have this huge black market. Do you think kids don't get drugs if they really want them? Do you think adults don't get drugs if they really want them? Do you think it has stopped the dealers in these drugs? If the price seems high enough to incur the risk of possible arrest and imprisonment or being killed in a shootout? No, it continues to go on. It is unwinnable. As long as people want something and are willing to pay for it, whether you like it or not, there'll be someone who will incur the sufficient risk to bring it to market. So all the black market is the market that has been repressed due to government laws. Now, the same thing applies, in my humble opinion, to the immigration issue. What is the natural pattern of human beings? To go where life seems better, where a better job opportunity exists, where you think you'll be freer compared to various political or social repressions that you're living under a different government. And these flows will not stop. And as long as government tries to hinder them, they just create these problems. These mules and these coyotes that they talk about, sneaking people across the border, through the desert or across the Rio Grande, or in the case of Europe, across the Mediterranean from the Middle East or North Africa. Oh, these people die in these little boats in the Mediterranean. The people are drowning in the Rio Grande. Oh, these people are dying from lack of water or from the heat in the desert. And these smugglers, they steal from these people and rip them off and either kill them or leave them to die. But why? Because you have told these people that they don't have the freedom to move. And by preventing them from moving, and they want to move, the same way a person, you tell him he can't get a drug, but he wants it, and he does it anyway and deals with those who are in the criminal end of this. these people end up in the hands of the criminals for smuggling human traffic. And as long as it's illegal, this is going to continue. There is no motive and incentive for Biden or Trudeau or the president of Mexico to bring this to an end. Besides, there's big money in it for them. It rationalizes this, the power. It guarantees certain budgets for drug and immigration related law enforcement. If you have the drug wars, what happens to the employees in these government agencies that are tied up in connection with it? Or the immigration enforcement agencies, what happens to their budgets and their employment? So you create this huge network of vested interests, all who gain and have and live at other people's expenses, the taxpayers' expenses, by making these things illegal.
Yeah, when you were talking about the drug part of it, I remember, that Netflix series called Narcos, which is an excellent series. I highly recommend. But it was it was revolving around Pablo Escobar, the famous drug lord down in Colombia. And this guy was brutal, absolutely brutal. And I remember one of his cohorts saying to him, there's talk of legalization of drugs in the United States. And if this happens, you will be such a successful businessman because look how much money you've made doing this. And I'm sitting there thinking, you idiot, you have no conception that if drugs were legalized, your boss Escobar would be out of business immediately. Correct. Because he's the type of person that can compete in a black market. In a black market, you've got coercion and force and killing. I mean, that's how you get your customers and you get your base. You kill your competitors, and that doesn't happen in a legalized market. All of a sudden, you've got, like in the booze industry, you've got Anheuser-Busch and you got Coors, and they compete on the basis of price and quality and taste and so forth. They're not out there killing each other. And that's exactly what would happen with drugs, that people like Escobar and El Chapo and all the rest of them would simply fall by the wayside. They could not compete in a legitimate legalized market. And that's the way you put them out of business. I mean, that's why I can't understand why a president of Mexico wouldn't go that route, because there's been more than 100,000 people killed in Mexico in the last, 10, 12 years, not because of drugs, but because of the drug war. I mean, it's been vicious. The more the military cracks down, the worse the violence becomes. That's what's so interesting about this thing, which is just a repeat of what you were talking about, Al Capone and prohibition and so forth. The more they crack down on these guys, the worse the violence became. And so the only thing to do is just legalize. But as you point out, there's these vested interests. My hunch is that the Mexican Congress would be very, very averse to legalizing drugs, because many of them are on the take, and many of the government bureaucracies are on the take. The drug lords say, there's an old saying, plata o plomo, that you want silver or you want a bullet. And it's rational that if you're a law enforcement official in Mexico and you're offered that choice, it's rational to take the money. Because if you stand with your integrity, the probability is you're going to be dead along with your wife and your kids. And what have you accomplished with your death? Like these 10 soldiers that got killed in this operation to capture El Chapito, what have they accomplished with those deaths? Nothing. What are those 100,000 people? What have they died for? Nothing, because the drug trade continues to go on. New drug businessmen in that black market take the place of the ones that have been captured or killed or whatever, and everything just goes on as normal. And as you point out, it's the same thing with immigration. You've got this black market that forms. That's why people die, and the immigrants die like in the backs of 18-wheelers and these tractor trailers of asphyxiation. And you've got, public officials lamenting this, and the press is horrified, and they prosecute the drivers, and they're super bad people. But what they won't recognize is it is their system that gives rise to these people and to this smuggling of human beings, just like their drug war gives rise to the smuggling of drugs. or when people cross the Rio Grande and they die, like there was a 25-year-old man a few years ago whose body was found on the American side of the Rio Grande with his little tiny toddler daughter, her body too. I mean, it's horrific. But as you point out, immigrants have always tried to seek a better life. This is nothing new. This is part of humanity, where people move to try to survive, try to get out of their country of origin, where they're faced with death by starvation or death by gang wars or a bullet fired at them by their government. And they move. They're willing to leave family, friends, culture. And so it's how they come in a legalized market. They would just cross the border like regular human beings. But instead, they have to trespass on people's ranches and farms in order to circumvent the checkpoints. They cross lonely deserts in the American Southwest where they die of dehydration and thirst, or they die because some Border Patrol agents fired a bullet into their abdomen. I mean, and this is all a consequence of this system. And I think if Americans would ever come to that realization, that it is this system that is the cause of the chaos that they lament. I mean, they look at the southern border and they see all these immigrants stopped up there trying to get in, and they think, oh, they're invading. This is what open borders means. Well, it's not what open borders means. Open borders is a very orderly concept. This is chaos, and this is chaos that comes from socialism. This is what central planning produces. You can talk to anybody in Venezuela or Cuba or North Korea, that they'll tell you this is what central planning does. It produces what Ludwig von Mises called planned chaos. I mean, what better term to describe the situation on the border, both with drugs and with immigration? Planned chaos. And it's a direct result of the system, not of freedom. Freedom is the solution. It's the antidote, both in the drug business as well as the immigration business.
Well, the hypocrisy runs in many directions. The president of Mexico calls upon Biden to arrange for the Congress to regularize the flow of people coming across the border. But at the same time, Mexico is unbelievably harsh in its own anti-immigrant rules. If people from Central American countries, Honduras, Guatemala, Nicaragua, if they want to come to Mexico, the Mexicans are not open arms about this. Now, if they're like going to be in caravans to go through Mexico to the United States, the Mexicans are happy with that. But if some Nicaraguan or Honduran says, I want to settle in Mexico, he is viewed as harshly as the anti-immigrant Americans view others from Latin America. I mean, the hypocrisy moves in many, many directions. But at the end of the day, you see, it all goes back to the idea that freedom is not believed in and freedom is not trusted. If we allow people to just freely trade, it will have bad effects. If we let people freely move, it'll have bad effects. If we allow people to freely invest, it'll have bad effects. The idea that the answer to this is to stop thinking in terms of nation states and borders on a map, but instead of just thinking as individuals peacefully, honestly, and voluntarily associating and interacting and trading with each other and moving about to where it's mutually beneficial for themselves and others. That's the answer to this. It is government intervention, it is government regulation, it is government planning of these flows that are the cause of all of these problems. Until they're eliminated, the problems will continue to exist, worsen, and create the corruption, hypocrisy, terrible consequences for human beings, and be unbelievably costly to the taxpayers everywhere.
Yeah, that's a great point about the hypocrisy of Mexican officials. Let me talk about the hypocrisy of American officials. You got Republicans that proudly proclaim themselves as supporters of free enterprise and free markets. Well, this immigration control system is the exact opposite of freedom and free markets. I mean, freedom and free markets is people crossing borders in search of work, getting a job, investing, consuming, touring. That's what genuine free enterprise is all about. Free markets is all about. But Republicans are famous for, I believe in free markets, except for this area, education or drugs or immigration or trade. And then when you add up all the buts, you find that you're living in a very tyrannical society. And then the Democrats, I love the Democrats because whenever they take on us libertarians for wanting to abolish their beloved welfare state programs, they say, oh, well, you just hate the poor, needy, and disadvantaged. Which is suggesting that they are great lovers of the poor, needy, and disadvantaged. And yet they've had and supported this immigration control system that has abused the poorest people in the world for decades. I mean, you couldn't find poorer people than these immigrants that are coming across. And the Democrats incarcerate them, they arrest them, they lament that they're coming over here. And so all this, oh, we love the poor, needy, and disadvantaged is exposed for the falsity it is by just pointing to their attitude toward immigrants.
Yeah, it all goes back to the need for a change in the general philosophy of the country, whether it be welfare or immigration or the drug issues. It all comes back to the fundamental issue: what is the role of government in society? What is the arena for personal freedom and voluntary association? And until those things are more effectively sorted out and reestablished, and more importantly, believed in, it's going to be very difficult to move away from these disasters. The politics, the corruption, the hypocrisy, the wanton loss and tragedy of human life.
Yeah, we really did need to do some soul searching in this country. I mean, some really self-examinations. And I think we need to go back to founding principles. I mean, we know there were some bad founding principles, slavery, women's rights, and so forth, but there were some good founding principles. And among these good founding principles was open immigration. We had this system for more than 100 years. Anybody could come here. Now at Ellis Island, yeah, they checked to see if you were insane or something like that, had tuberculosis. But other than that, anybody who wanted to come to the United States was free to do so for more than 100 years. I mean, that's an incredible achievement. It's one of the most wonderful economic systems that is ever seen in the history of mankind. And it worked. And it was consistent with economic principles, prosperity. This is one of the reasons there was so much prosperity, this division of labor that immigrants brought. And many of them had nothing. I mean, they couldn't even speak English. And they flooded American shores because they were coming to a land where the government didn't take care of people. There was no Social Security or Medicare or welfare. It was root hog or die. I mean, you were here to make it. And then there was this heritage also of no drug laws. I mean, America lived without drug laws for more than 100 years, Richard. And there wasn't all this violence that is associated with this drug war. And I think if we go back to these founding principles, a limited government republic, I think that's critical to the restoration of a free, peaceful, and prosperous nation. We've got a national security state form of governmental structure. That's the type of government in Egypt, in Russia, Cuba, North Korea, Venezuela. We don't need that type of governmental system. Our founding governmental system was a republic. With a limited basic military force instead of the CIA, the NSA, and the Pentagon, the empire of military bases, foreign interventions, and so forth. So if we go back and we do some real soul searching and self-examination, and we look at what the good founding principles of this country were, sound money was another one. No income tax. People kept everything they earned. No coercive mandatory charity. Everybody handle their own charitable decisions on their own, including children, honoring mother and father when in their hour of need, neighborhood groups, church groups. We restore these kind of principles, and now all of a sudden we're talking about putting this country back on the right road, the road to peace, prosperity, and harmony with the people of the world.
No, until we have reestablished these things, it'll be very difficult. This is it also is a great frustration to me that how many of our fellow advocates of liberty presume that they have to take the existing system for granted. Now, obviously, nothing changes unless a law gets repealed, a regulation is removed from the books. But if you read too many of the arguments and the positions of too many other free market organizations, their presumption is, well, you know, these laws are here. You really can't eliminate them. You don't want to do away with them completely. What we want to do is to deregulate, not abolish or repeal, but to deregulate, to loosen up, to make the government controls less harsh, less as inefficiently managed. And basically, that's an attempt to make the system work when 99.9% of the time it involves things that cannot be made to work better. It only can work better if you eliminate the government's role in it.
Yeah, that's a great point. Especially in this area of immigration, when you see advocates of liberty saying, well, we need to keep this machinery in place, but we have to persuade the government to just let in more immigrants because immigrants are a force for good in America. Well,
and the right type of immigrants.
Right types of immigrants. So but you keep this machinery in place and you still get the police state and the deaths and the destruction of liberty and so forth. You've got to get rid of this system. And the analogy I use sometimes is slavery. That, if we had lived in 1855 Alabama, we could have spent our lives trying to reform slavery or phase it out slowly. But my position would have been no matter how unpopular that position may be, we've got to advocate liberty, the immediate end of slavery. And that's what we have to do with tyranny here at home and socialism here at home. We've got to stand for the abolition of this thing because it's only through abolition of infringements on freedom that you can truly be considered free. On that note, Richard, we'll wrap it up.
Yeah.
We've run out of time and enjoyed the conversation. If you're new to FFF, come visit us at fff.org for around 33 years of principled arguments on liberty. Buy our books. One of our earliest books, Richard, as you'll recall, that you and I both co-edited, and you were the chief editor of the book, was The Case for Free Trade and Open Immigration. Yeah. And we've got tons of conferences and videos on our website and articles in my daily blog. Richard writes for us every month in our monthly journal. And if you like our work, we'd greatly appreciate your financial support. Richard, on that note, look forward to talking to you next week.
Until next time.